Welcome, everybody. My name is Ulrike de Jong, and welcome to today's webinars, Remember the Why, CSRD as a Driver for Change. I'm one of the founding partners of Tosca. Tosca stands for Tribe of Sustainability Change Agents, as you can see here on the slide. And I'm very much looking forward actually to today's webinar. Because many of you, or all of you, I'm sure, are currently deeply involved in the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. I'm sure most of you might recognize that you're currently maybe executing a double materiality analysis. Maybe you are in the process of doing a gap analysis or collecting data. Maybe you already have discussions with the accountant on limited assurance. Or you're preparing for the annual report for the future or for last year. And we, as Tosca thought, actually, this is a perfect time because we are so much involved and are so much busy with the CSRD that sometimes we actually forget the why and the purpose, what we want to achieve. So for us, it's all about also behavioral change and making sure that in the end, we all contribute to all the important long-term targets, such as reaching the Paris Agreement for a better world. So today we would like to remind us all that behavior change is key. And of course, also the CSRD has a very important role in that journey, but it's not all of it. It's all about also behavior change. So we have some housekeeping rules before we start. First of all, you already saw we are recording the meeting. You saw already that quite some people are joining, but we had a very big group of applications. So we will also make sure that the recordings will be sent to the overall group after we finish this webinar. Please also make actively use of the chat box. This should be an interactive webinar with all your participation. So make sure that all questions, comments you put in the chat box, and please mute yourself so that will ensure that we can also have a good quality conversation and that everybody can understand each other. We have a nice agenda set up, so I will do a quick introduction quickly about Tosca, who we are, what we do, but then of course we want to dive into the context and the content as fast as possible. We will first give a short introduction on the CSRD as tool for change. So Marjolein will do that and see how that can be leveraged as tool for change. Then we will go into choosing sustainable behavior. So there are a lot of different practices you in a company can apply to actually embed sustainability that we will focus on in the second part of this webinar. And then Marjolein will take over to talk about intervention for sustainable behavior, because you're also quite aware that sometimes we do also have resistance, and it's very important to understand where that comes from and how we can deal with it. And I'm here not alone, so I'm very, very happy and pleased to have fantastic guest speakers on board. So we have Marjolein Baghuis in the room online, who is an expert also on behavior change. Actually just finished a whole study about it. So we are very glad to have Marjolein here, and also Eelco Smit, Senior Manager, Environmental Affairs and Compliance from Panasonic Europe. But I would like, before we start to go into the content, to just let the presenters introduce themselves. Marjolein, maybe you can start?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ulrike. My name is Marjolein Baghuis, and I've been working in sustainability strategy and communications since 2010. I used to work for GRI, so did a lot of things related to reporting and communications, but also focusing on the materiality aspect. And now also dedicating quite some time to, indeed, behavior change for sustainability, and not so much with consumers or citizens, but really focusing on the change you need within the organization. So very happy to share some of that today. Eelco, over to you.
Good. Hi, everyone. I'm Eelco Smit. Well, as it says on the slide, I'm working for Panasonic Europe. I'm leading there the Environmental Affairs and Product Compliance team, which means that it's very much about the product, right, and sustainability. So on the one side, what's happening on the legislative front, what kind of requirements do we need to meet? But on the other side, also the more voluntary activities. So how can we respond to customer needs, but also retailer questions around sustainability? How can we make products more sustainable, packaging more sustainable? I've been at Panasonic for just over a year now, but overall almost more than 20 years experience in sustainability in the electronic space. Worked for Philips, Epson, LG, so I've been around. And yeah, done a lot of different elements of sustainability. So more innovation, more the management side of things, strategy development. So yeah, very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Fantastic, thanks. So I think we will have indeed a great conversation, a lot of knowledge in the room. So I will do the introduction about Tosca quite briefly, but it's also important to understand who we are, where we come from. So we are a small consulting boutique with 9 professionals from different backgrounds: purchasing, communications, accounting, strategy, and we help companies implementing their sustainability strategy, of sustainable strategy actually, to really understand how you create value, the implementation, where also it's very important to understand how you can successfully, sustainably embed sustainability in your organization or company culture. And then, of course, the reporting and the CSRD, which is now a hot topic. But the good thing is, and the nice thing is, that the CSRD, once you start working with it, you also have to go back and start looking at your strategy implementation. And then, of course, you have the report, which you have to publish once a year. But we will come back to that in just a little while. And we also have a transformation program together with Rob van Tulde from Rotterdam School of Management. So if you visit our website, please check it out and you will see more details on it. Looking at our customers, we have corporate, small, family-owned business in all different sectors, from construction, healthcare, distribution. So you see that it's quite a variety. We also have partnerships with all the expertise we don't have in-house. For instance, biodiversity, we have a partnership with NL Adviseurs to make sure that also the expertise is there. And we also we teach quite a lot also at the Impact Center Erasmus, as an example, or the NCD. So there's a few examples of what we do and who we are. We have a roadmap we usually work with, but it's just here you can have a look at it. Must be quite familiar to you working in sustainability. And so first identifying your ambition as a company, where you want to do, what sustainability topics have priority, embed that in the report, but most importantly also in your strategy. Then the implementation, and of course the communication is very important. So just for you to have a look at the roadmap we usually use as a umbrella for the work we do. But before we dive now into the detail, actually, it's good to set the scene, because the CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, is the trigger for many. Many of us are currently working on it or are involved with it. So I would like to hand over actually to Marjolein, who will bring it a bit more in context and why we see the CSRD as a tool for change. Marjolein, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go for the next slide. So CSRD actually stems from the EU Green Deal. So as many of you know, there are many, many elements to the Green Deal, but all of them are really directed at getting the transition to a greener Europe, and green in a broad sense, not just environmental topics, but also social topics, really driving change within the EU and the companies in the EU and other organizations in the EU. And so reporting is part of that. Some link that to financing the transition, so investors can make better choices to help drive that change, but also the whole reporting practice really makes companies more aware of where their impacts are, how sustainability topics impact them, and with that really going into a change mechanism, making the report a tool, not a goal in itself. Now, also very conscious, like Ulrike said in the opening sentences, that at this moment, so many companies are having to deal with, especially if you're doing this for the first time, kickstarting your CSRD journey. So it's easy to forget why the reporting directive is there. But if you zoom out and look at, it's part of the Green Deal, it's really about, making sure the transition to a more sustainable world, a more sustainable Europe happens. The risk is, let's go to the next slide, if we lose sight what it is, we could get stuck in a paper exercise, ticking boxes. And with the many clients that we work with, we often hear, oh, it's all about, we're in this compliance mindset, we're just ticking boxes. And it's very easy to lose sight of CSRD as a driver for change. Very happy to also hear the other sound and having clients and other people that we interact with say, no, we're really using it to drive change. Let's go to the next slide. And I think that's a little poll. So, you know, we're putting this in the context of CSRD, but of course, it's also useful for people who don't have to do CSRD. But we are also very curious to see where you are. If you need to do a CSRD report, where are you on your CSRD journey? So there should be a poll popping up on your screen. How are you using the CSRD? And maybe you're not in, you don't need to do CSRD, then don't answer this yet. Let's see how you're using it. Can everyone see? I'm not seeing any answers yet, so I hope, oh, I am seeing answers now. Very good. I'll give you a couple more seconds to before we close the poll. All right, so let's see where we are. So you're really seeing a variety of answers. So some are just getting started. Some are really using it as a driver for change. Others are struggling or, yeah, really just on track for compliance. Some are not doing anything yet. So very, very different kind of answers. Now, if there's anything you want to share, there will be time for some interaction. Put stuff in the chat. If you have comments, then we can pick those up as we go along. But good to know this is where you're at. All right. Then let's head back to Ulrike. She's going to take us through to different types of sustainability behavior change that you could aim for as an organization.
Thank you so much, Marjolein. Yes, so we will indeed focus on how you can indeed embed, what are ways to embed sustainability in your corporate culture. And I will give a quick introduction first, then we will have a poll again to see where you are in your organization. And then most importantly, we have a discussion and a conversation with Eelco. And of course, please, we invite you to chop in and join the discussion together. What we see actually currently is that, yeah, being sustainable, I'm sure most of you, all of you actually recognize it. It's no longer a cost of doing business. It's really a catalyst for innovation, for new business models, growth, market opportunities, and the role of business within that is very important to reach system transformation. What we also see is that also there's a striking gap between what companies are doing and actually how we are doing things. So the behavior part is very, very important in the journey we have to undergo. What we also see is, and you might recognize that, is that companies, they actually face challenges to implement strategies across all business functions. So sometimes it might start within one of the departments, but the most important, of course, to really embed sustainability throughout the company is that it's also fully embedded in all different kind of business function. And we come back to that later on. What you also see is that when we ask leaders over the next 5 years, what stakeholder groups do you believe will have a great impact in that journey to manage sustainability? You see also that consumers, they play a very important role, but also employees. And that is, I think, very important to recognize as they also drive for change. And next to that, of course, regulators important and also governance. But you see indeed consumers and employees play a crucial and important role. If you think about how do you want to make impact, it's always a combination of things, right? But what's important to recognize is the strategy, is very important, but also how we're doing things, so the behavior. And those combined is a very important starting point to have effective sustainability initiatives embedded. What's also important is to understand there are a lot of cultural change initiatives actually within companies, and I'm sure you recognize that. But there's a few differences when we look at sustainability. So what makes sustainability different to our other cultural change initiatives? So first of all, it actually may involve the need for new business models. So we see that actually a lot currently going on, that the old business models are currently not working anymore, or they're not contributing to the ambitions we have as a society, but also as a company. So we need to have room for new business model and approaches. You also see that sustainability is really beyond the organization boundaries. Also in the CSRD, you recognize that the role of the value chain is crucial, is very important. So that's also important in developing initiatives. It goes very much beyond your own organizational boundaries, and you have to partner up, as you cannot do it alone. What you also see is that sustainability is often also driven by external forces, can be regulations, can be weather, can be the way you partner up with other organizations. And also what you see in sustainability is that many times you don't see the benefits directly. So it may take some time when you initially drive the change, that will take some time. But actually the big question is, how can you embed sustainability in your company, and what practices are actually working well, and which ones might not work well. So for that, we would like to introduce to you this model, and maybe some of you have seen it before or understand it. This model is about, from the Network for Business Sustainability from Simon Fraser University. And actually what it shows that there are scientifically proven practices where we can learn from, and we know that those are effective to embed sustainability in your organization. To explain that, I would like to just explain the different dimensions and give a few examples. And then, of course, we dive into your feedback and then into the discussion with Eelco. So there are a lot of formal practices that help us leveraging the rules and the procedures. So we marked it with a red dot. So the CSRD, the reporting part, is one of those formal practices. But you also see that there are 59 other practices which are very much important. Formal practices, indeed, reporting is one of the examples, but you can also think about envisioning that you have a long-term perspective where you want to go with your company. You can translate that then back to your current situation where you are. Formal practices also are seen as, for instance, the double materiality assessment, to prioritize, understand what impacts you have influence on, so positive or negative influence, and also the strategy is very important. Then if you look at the opposite from the formal practices, you also see that there are informal practices which are very important to embed sustainability. If we look at informal practices, maybe to give just a few examples what that actually entails, it's about, for instance, storytelling, right? So what kind of stories do you as a company have to tell to actually share in your organization, but also with your stakeholders to really take them on board on your sustainability journey. It's also about explaining, making sure that all employees in the company understand how they can personally contribute to that journey. And also commitment, right? So it's also indeed commitment from leadership, from maybe the CEO, if they externally communicate about sustainability, that there are strong commitments available. Just a few examples, and I'm sure in the discussion we will dive deeper into different other practices. Then if you look at the other horizontal line, you also have practices which are, on the one hand, help to embed sustainability to deliver on your current commitments. So here you can think about It's about manage talent, right? So have the right people in place in the organization, make sure that in the onboarding process, new employees from the first start understand the sustainability objectives. It's also about developing, understanding what possible knowledge gaps are available in the company and how you can overcome those possible knowledge gaps. And maybe a last example for the delivering on existing commitments, also personal goals, so that for each employees, it's very much important to understand how they can contribute in their own role, where sustainability might not be the key part of their responsibility, but still understand how each employee can contribute to the sustainability journey. And then the last dimension on the right-hand side, advancing, or the opposite of delivering on existing commitment, is about advancing further along the path to sustainability. So this is actually, those are all commitments giving room for new business models. So giving room for pilots, new ideas, new approaches, so that we actually make also budget available, free up resources, as an example, but also indeed gather knowledge from internally, but also very important from external partners. So I hope this gives, there's a lot, of course, more to tell about this model, but I hope it sets a little bit the scene on the different dimensions. So we have formal practices, informal practices, we have practices that help to deliver on current commitments, and we have practices to advance further along the path to sustainability. What's also important is 60 practices. We don't want to give the message you have to do them all, right? It's also choosing the ones where you're currently already good in and where you need to want to put the focus on. But that is, will come back in the discussions. We have also a poll for you for this part, because we would like to understand what are the main gaps you foresee in practice in the organization you're currently working in when embedding sustainability. So of course, but the ones which has the most priority in your organization as we speak. And you should now see the question, the second questions. So we have as an answer possibility the 4 dimensions, which we just explained. Is it, what are the biggest challenges you see? Is it delivering on existing commitments, more the formal practices, or more the informal practices, like the storytelling and commitment? Please give your vote and your input. That will also help in the discussion we will have coming up with Eelco. So I see a lot of people actually have the main gaps on advancing further along the path to sustainability. Now, that's a nice one indeed, because it's also something we see here, that also the focus is many times more given to the formal practices, but really making room for advancing sustainability is, let me just close. Yes, and then you can see the results also. So that is, I think, a nice reflection also, that the challenge is really in advancing the new path to sustainability, and the least challenge is on delivering on existing commitments. Yeah, Eelco. So having heard all that, maybe having also seen the results from the audience, yeah, you have, of course, a wealth of experience currently in Panasonic Europe and also other companies before that. So maybe would like to, can you give us a few examples on your experience on the, yeah, when embedding sustainability in the work you do? What worked well for you? What examples can you give? And maybe also some examples what you found out actually didn't work. So over to you, Eelco. Looking forward to your your insights.
Thanks, Ulrike. Yeah, so I think the most important thing is that there is actually not one answer to this question, right? So there's not one single thing that you have to do, right? A must do to embed sustainability into your organization. It's really a combination of the things that you need to do. So I think also, as the model describes, you need a very clear story, right? Because you need to be able to explain what you do. You need a strategy, right? You need your goals. You need support from your leaders, right? I think that's also very important, that people follow leaders. So that can be, a CEO, right? A director of the organization, but can also be more informal kind of leaders, thought leaders in your organization. You need to educate people, right? Your employees, what to do, how to do. Target setting can work really well, both on the company level or a business unit level, but also for people, right? Reward people for the right behavior. Embedding sustainability into processes, really making it the new normal. Some people will, do this because they really believe in it, right? The sustainability thing. But some people will just do their job, right? And then we have to make it easy and just make it part of the job, right? Make it part of the processes. And I always think that it's very important to build a community, right, in your organization. Employees are really the thing that will really make the biggest change in the end. And having the people on board, that community, I think is very critical. So, not one thing, but many. And I think if we look at the model, I think you said it well, right? You don't need to do every 60 elements of that model, but I think you do need to go full circle, right? So you need to pick one or two, right, from each of the quadrants, to really make sure that you have a model, a system that can support the whole transformation around sustainability. And I think that's very, very important to do.
And you mentioned the initiative also with your employees, to train them, to make them sure. Also, can you give some examples of maybe how, because it's quite also a challenge in the big organizations, how to reach maybe some examples how you approach that in the past.
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of educating and inspiring. So educating is not enough. So, a lot of companies use e-learning systems to explain what to do, what are our policies, what are our strategies, what are we doing, what are we working on. And I think that's very important, also to show, companies have many learning tools, right? They will talk about legal compliance, they will talk about, HR kind of policies. And it's important that sustainability has a place in there as well, right? That people recognize and see it's part of the formal training program. But it's really just one of the elements. I think next to that, you also need to inspire people. So you need to give people a great story, right, on why we're doing this. And I think then to also bring it back to the topic of today, CSRD. I think for a lot of companies, there has been a reason to embark on a sustainability journey because, transparency needs to be given. We need to work on this. We need to report. But it cannot be the reason, right, for most employees to actually do this. So I think you really need to come up with a compelling story. Why are we doing this? Are we doing this because we believe, sustainability is the right thing to do? Do we see that there's value that we can create for our customers, our consumers? Do we see other opportunities? I think that is a very essential part, right? Building that story that people can relate to, and also they can see opportunities, right? It's not just about being compliant. It's also about seeing opportunities to actually do better. I think that also links a bit to what was already said in the chat, right? This is not about cost. It's also very much about opportunity, right? Looking for this opportunity and capturing those. And what can work well is building a community. I mean, using the tools that you have, right? Either if you're on Microsoft, use Teams to build your community, use FIFA Engage as a way to build a community. But find a way to reach the people in your organization that are enthusiastic about sustainability. Every organization will have people that aspire to do more. And I think you need to find those because those will be your change agents, right? Those will be the ones that can informally change the organization and make you move forward.
Yeah, fantastic. I love the word change agents. Also at Tosca, I think that's very important to make sure that everybody feels that also, that they can indeed leverage and then indeed be the change agent in that particular part of the organization indeed. Yeah. Hey, and Eelco, maybe one part, because we also saw as a result of the chat that a lot of people from the audience, and I think also in the discussion with our customers, you see that that because we have to focus now on the formal practices, for instance, the CSRD, the room that also looking at resources, maybe also budget, so really the room for innovation and advancing the sustainability practices or business models that might sometimes lag behind. Is that also sometimes to keep that balance? Is that also something you recognize, or how to make sure that the balance is in place?
Yeah, I mean, there's only 40 hours in a week, right? Or if you work a bit harder, 50 or 60, but there's limits to what you can do, right? And also in the sustainability team, there's limits to what you can do. So I think naturally, a lot of companies are now challenged with CSRD, but next to that also CSRD, the due diligence requirements, and there are many regulatory requirements that you can do. So I can completely sympathize with, the fact that most companies will spend a lot of the resources that they have on just being compliant at this moment. But that's why it is so important to keep in mind that it is really just, a part of the story, right? Being compliant and reporting is just a step into it. I think most important is that over time you start to show progress, right? So even if you take fully just that reporting view and the compliance view, if you report the same CO2 footprint, right, year after year, it really is not going to help you. So I think that's why it is so important to balance the two, right? So balance your efforts. Yes, compliance is important, but make sure you bring on enough people, right? Maybe not from your team. The sustainability team doesn't need to do everything. That's maybe also something to remember. I mean, 20 years ago or 10 years ago, while we were in the sustainability teams, we did everything ourselves, right? If we wanted to make a change, if we wanted to go and improve a factory, we would go there. I would sort out the waste management, right? Or we would actually negotiate the energy contracts to move into renewable energy. And that is impossible, right? With the changes that we now aspire to do, right? With the big goals that we have towards 2030, 2050, you cannot do everything as a sustainability team. So it is very, very important that you get, other teams on board, right? That your facility team knows what to do, that your procurement team knows what to do, that you're supporting you, that your sales teams know how they can actually move towards a circular economy business model, for instance. And I think that is really also the solution to it, right? So we got to move away from just only doing stuff, and also to much more to leading, right? And to helping people in that transition.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much indeed. Yeah, and the focus, I think you also mentioned that indeed we cannot do it all, but really prioritize on the key parts where you actually can make the biggest impact. And also within the initiative, I think you mentioned it very well, that you don't have to do all of those, right? So, but also really understand what are the practices you can make a difference, you need to focus on, and which ones you're doing well. So
do what you're great at, right?
Yes.
From the 60, also pick the things that you're good at, right? That either as a person or as an organization, you do well, right? And pick those and make it even stronger, right? If you invest time in all 60, you're gonna have very minimal impact, right? I mean, choose 8 or 10, right? Across the wheel and then go deep on those and make an impact.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a great takeout indeed, maybe 2 per dimension, so it's evenly spread, and then focus on fewer and do them good, then do them well, rather than on many things and not doing them well at all. Yeah, fantastic. Looking at the time, I think I would like to move on, and looking at the chat, I think we have answered the questions. Otherwise, please help me, Marjolein. But I think I would like to hand over to you, Marjolein.
Yeah, I would. There's a theme in the comments that I would like to bring into this conversation about leadership engagement. And I'm really curious to hear from Eelco. How do you keep leadership engaged? Because that's also a key behavior, and they're also the ones to create space for others to take different kinds of leadership that you were just talking about. So before we switch,
I think
something else, but this is I think a recurring theme in the comment.
Yeah, I saw it as well. Yeah, so I think it's very important that also you have a very, very clear and strong story towards your leadership, right? And that story has to be about being compliant, right? But also about having those opportunities, right? So if you are leading a big company and the CEO, you will be very interested to understand what your customer wants, right? So what kind of sustainability questions are we getting from our customers, right? What kind of sustainability needs do they have? Or even your banks, right? If you're looking for new kind of financing of your organization, sustainability can actually be a very powerful tool, right? To get access to those funds. So I think that story is very important, right? So to give your leaders the understanding of, what does it take to be compliant? And how can we use that compliance effort, right, to turn it into something that can create value for the company? And how can we then also embed it into those more formal practices? Because I think that's also what, the leadership organizations, get them to support your strategy, but also make them a visible ambassador of the program. Because I think, if you're very honest, CEOs like attention, right? They like it if people listen to them. And I think sustainability can actually be a very powerful tool to position a CEO as an inspirational leader, right? I mean, that's not a goal by itself to make your CEO an inspirational leader, but if that is what does the trick, you know, if that is what it is to actually get your CEO to commit to doing certain things, then do it. So be a bit opportunistic, right? Combine the must do with the want to do, right? Because of opportunities, and spend enough time with them, right? So really spend enough time with them to make sure that they understand it, that they see the opportunities, and that they're willing to support you on that journey.
Great, thanks. Really useful insights. Thank you. All right, then let's head into the next session, which is about once you've identified. So here are the areas, like Ulrike was saying, maybe choose a couple from each of the 4 dimensions that she was sharing. You have to make it very specific to design an intervention. You can't just say, oh, we're going to make everyone more sustainable or more aware. You have to make things very specific. So that's what this next session is a little bit about. And once you define that specific behavior, let's go to the next slide. Once you define that, what is it that you want? You have to make that as specific as possible. So who is it that you want to move, and where do you want them to move? And along that path of getting people to change their behavior, you will encounter all kinds of resistance. And this is why it's so important to formulate your desired behavior as specifically as possible. So this is the group of people or the person I want change from, because the resistance is going to be quite personal or maybe department specific. Now, the first layer in this is the perceived importance. Do people think, yeah, I think it's important why we're driving this change in the organization? If people understand that, then they'll also think about why it's relevant for themselves. Now, the next layer is about, okay, so the first layer is I understand why it's important to adopt this new behavior. The next layer is, okay, I'll do it. Now, we all know, think about yourself on a diet, or your intention to go to the gym, or to eat healthier, or even to floss. You may have the intention, but there's a difference between having the intention and actually doing it. So that's another level of resistance that you'll face. People are just very likely to continue in the old ways. So how do you actually help them get to that next level? So please click again, Ulrike, and we'll get some quotes that go with. Yeah, so the first level is, if you want people to say, oh, I understand that I have a role in this and that it's important. At the second level is I understand what to do, and I'm planning to do it. And the third level is really I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But it's important to think about, if you want to drive change and people are not displaying the behavior that you'd like them to have, where is it going wrong? Because it requires different interventions. And we'll get into that on the next slide. So these are some terms from the psychology behind behavior change. But that first level of perceived importance, the resistance to that is reactance. People might feel like, oh, you're attacking my autonomy. This is not my idea. Or there'll be resistance against the source. Who are you to tell me this? Or any kind of influence. Some people don't want to have any change at all. So, or change, people want change. They just want to decide that for themselves. So at this level, that's really important to think about. The next level is called skepticism. So people might not adopt the intention to really display the desired behavior. And the reason they might not do that is they feel, oh, it won't work. So yes, I understand why it's important, but the way you're telling me to do this, I don't think it's going to work. Or, or it won't work with our partners, or it won't work with our employees. And then there's always the, yeah, but, and also there's a big element of fear here. People that'll say, I don't know how to do this, so I'll just pretend that I don't have to do it. and it makes people skeptical to adopt the behavior. And then the last element there is inertia. This is a nice, difficult word to say people just stick to what they were doing before. So this is all about conservation of energy. It costs the least amount of energy to do what you were doing before. So if people perceive it as this takes too much effort, or they're just very set in their ways, or they're not being incentivized to make that switch, people will be passive and avoid the new behavior. So how do you overcome these? So with a lack of perceived importance, focus on inspiration, create a sense of ownership and commitment, help people decide the need for this for themselves. I think a lot of the examples that Eelco was talking about from the leadership actually fit in really nicely here. Once people understand that it's important, how do you help them to really develop an intention to drive change or to change their behavior? Here, it's much more about information to reduce the insecurity, help them make it very specific. This is what we'd like you to do. Here's how to do it. Helping each other do it. And then for the last stage, it's really creating conditions that make it as easy as possible to take the next step. And one of my favorite examples is I know the Dutch railways, overnight, they took away all the trash cans in all the offices and put in recycling stations in more central locations. They've been pushing recycling in their offices. This is a small thing, but just to make it, to signal we are going to change how we collect our trash. It'd been out there, but there were still trash cans in every office. So overnight, they removed all of them, and it just made it impossible not to walk to the central places to separate the trash. So here, those are just some examples. There'll be some other examples in the deck that you'll receive after the webinar. Now, one thing to note is there's an order to resolving the resistance. So if people don't buy into the change, so that the reactants all the way on the left-hand side, you can throw information and training at them all you want, but it's never going to be as successful as it could be as if you resolve the reactants first. And the same with inertia and skepticism. So really think, where is it? And you have to resolve the resistance from left to right on this model. It's going to be much more effective. So really think about, what do I need to address in the organization to drive that change, that specific change with a group of people. All right, so let's see what the key type of resistance that you're facing in your organization. And if it's all across the board, think about which one is the most difficult for you or the most pressing. So we'll launch another poll. So what is the key type of resistance that you're facing in your organization? You can scroll down, and here's the reactants. Are people buying into the idea, or are people skeptical because they don't really know how to get started, or are they just not getting started? You can see there's a variety of answers. So far, inertia, people are just not getting started, is in the lead. Okay, we'll share the results on the screen. So you see that inertia is the main one, but also a bit of lack of buy-in and a lack of making it concrete of what people can do. Interesting. Anyone want to share an example of inertia in their organization? Maybe stick up your hand or unmute yourself before we ask Eelco about these types of resistance. No one? All right, maybe we'll put in the chat if you want to, but then otherwise I'd really like to hear from Eelco, you know, what kind of resistance you recognize and maybe some examples of how you overcame them.
Yeah, so I think all of them sound very, very familiar.
Yeah.
I think actually the most important thing, right, as a sustainability leader or a sustainability manager is you have to be stubborn. Right? I think that is probably the most important thing. So, and don't take no for an answer. I mean, no hardly ever means no, it will never happen, right? I mean, it most of the time means, well, no, not now, right? Well, no, not under this condition, right? Well, I'm busy at this moment, right? Or I don't really understand it. And I think that is really the most important thing, right? Is trying to understand what is actually driving the resistance, right? So what is actually really the problem? Why is someone not joining you on this journey? Exactly. Because then you can actually try to resolve that. So really try to understand what is the problem. And, you know, if it is about the reactants, right? You know, it's not my idea. I think co-creation is a very powerful tool, right? And I think that's maybe even the most important thing is also as a sustainability manager, you know, don't be afraid to be a bit opportunistic, right? Getting people to move is the most difficult thing and it's the most important thing, right? But once they move, they will typically start to move much quicker over time, right? And they will start to do more. But it's that first step that is really the most important thing. And I think that also comes back to the inertia, right? We don't really know what to do or how to do, you know. Help people, right? Sit down with them, co-create. It doesn't necessarily need to be my idea, right? That we implement. It can also be their idea, right? As long as they move, right? As long as they take their first step towards sustainability behavior, you got them, right? I mean, they're out of the closet, right? They are suddenly becoming your sustainability ambassador, and they will start to do more. So I try to do that, and I think, you know, there's many examples of how to do that. Run a brainstorm with them, right? Run a workshop on how to define kind of options. I'm always a big supporter also of, you know, lean startup kind of thinking, right? Really using kind of agile methods to implement sustainability, because very often, if you look, for instance, at circular economy business models, they're very complicated, right? And they're very difficult to fit into an existing business model template. And so how to prove that changing your entire production system or your entire, you know, sales strategy or business model will be successful, that's almost impossible, right? But if you break it up into little bits and pieces, so if your key, you know, assumption is that my customer is willing to lease something, you can actually test that very small. You don't need to implement a full-scale lease system. You can test that, right, through user groups or whatever. So I think that also that agility, right, looking at small elements and try to, you know, tackle the resistance one by one gives you a much better chance of actually being successful in the long run.
There's a great question in the chat because you said you have to be stubborn. Those were your opening words. And somebody actually asked, how do I do that without being perceived as annoying or pushy?
Yeah, well, that is my main risk always, right? Of being perceived as annoying, as being pushy. And I am, right? But I think it is actually also being open and not always pushing your idea, right? So that's why I think that co-creation, right? Let people come up with their own ideas, right? And being slightly opportunistic as well, right? You know, I think the most important thing is that people are willing to move. Right. So if people think that, you know, the most important thing to do indeed in the office is to, you know, replace the plastic cups, which are anyway difficult to get these days, with stone cups, if they think that is the most important thing to do, help them get it done. Right. Even if you think that actually changing, you know, putting solar panels on the roof is much more impactful, it doesn't matter. Right. Help them to achieve their small results. Right. And they will help you achieve the big results in the long run.
Nice. Yeah, that was also going to be, it's a bit along the line. I think always think from their point of view, what do they find important and how can you connect what you want done to their key motives, their key drivers, their key priorities.
Exactly. If you help them achieve their goals, they will be much more inclined to help you achieve your goals in the long run.
Yeah. No, and also how you framed the question about engaging leadership. You know, they're in charge of compliance, but they're also in charge of innovation. So if you link it to those things, I think that was already a very good example of making it, you know, you are going to be persistent and stubborn, but framing it in different ways to get your results. Yeah, really nice. All right. Any specific examples you could give on maybe how you overcame resistance? Like maybe a specific group that you wanted to change, just to give an example, make it very concrete.
So I think there's many ways of doing it. So I think one of the tools, also on the more formal side, right? I mean, some people are just not so inclined to move, right? Even leaders. But if you can actually implement targets and implement dashboards, right? That can actually be super, super powerful. Because many leaders, they will show their standard behavior. If you give them a dashboard, it doesn't matter what it is, right? They will start to look what KPIs are red, and they will want to know why they're red, right? And they want to know how to get them to green. And it doesn't really matter if you give them a financial dashboard or a quality dashboard or a sustainability dashboard, right? So if you can get people to move into that kind of behavior, show a dashboard, that is a way to actually get people on board who may not be so inclined to do this voluntarily, but they will still very much do it. I think also standardizing can be a simple way. I think also that idea of, what it's difficult, right? It's complex. We've done a lot of work on recycled plastics, and yes, that is more complex because you got to find, different kind of suppliers. You got to do different kind of tests. It's going to take much longer. You introduce a lot of uncertainty in the innovation process, but we're actually helping to standardize and actually say that we're going to go for one supplier, right? And we're going to fully release that supplier from the center. And we're going to do all the tests from the center to actually take away the hurdles, right, and all these obstacles from the innovation teams, right? And you make it actually very easy for them to be sustainable. And yes, it makes some work for us, right, in the central team to do that. But then you allow people, right, that actually need to do the work to do it much more effectively. And I think that's always how you need to look at it. So understand, right, is that, why is the innovation team not moving? Is it indeed the complexity? Is it the cost, right? Or do they maybe not understand the customer opportunity and try to address that problem?
Yeah, nice. Really good to have some real specific examples. All right. Well, with that, if there are anyone from the group that wants to share, and there's some things going on in the chat, this is what I'm doing exactly. Any other thoughts there? If you want to just share, we have time for like one example. If anyone has a specific example they want to share. It's a shy crowd today. Eelco, then I'm going to put this question to you as the final example for you to share. Maybe one where you really felt, oh, if I could do that again, I would do it differently with everything you know now, where you tried to change behavior and it didn't work.
I mean, there are clearly also some examples where I've been too stubborn, right? And actually upset people by doing so. Maybe not so upset people, but push them up against the wall. And yeah, it's difficult to go really into examples. But I mean, there were some examples in the past where for instance, there was a certain leader who really wanted to have a recycling system in place for a specific product because he thought that was the best thing since sliced bread, right? And it would solve all our kind of stories and problems, and that would be the opportunity to capture the customer. And I really, really didn't believe it. Right? I just didn't see it happening, right? And I was persistent, or also persistent in not doing it for quite a while, right? And ignoring it. And you could feel that over time that was actually creating tension, right, with that person, because I was really not doing what he wanted us to do. So at some moment we gave up because he was also being very persistent that he wanted it. And the moment that we started doing this, right, and we started to test it, and actually the evidence showed that it was not so successful, he completely turned around, right? Because then we actually, we did what he asked for, right? We tried it, we gave him the evidence, and then he became much more of a stronger supporter. So I think that's also there. It's really about indeed, stepping over your own pride, right, and trying to help people in their journey.
Yeah, this is a beautiful example of beautiful example of your personal reactance against somebody else's idea.
Exactly. Yeah.
But then turning that around to convince the other one.
Exactly. And I see in the chat as well, right? Also the carrot and the stick, indeed. Right. Yeah. I mean, you use them both, right? So give people opportunities, right? Indeed, reward the people that are doing the right thing, right? Reward them, bring them, give them attention. And I think also as a sustainability professional, it's actually something where you can get quite a lot of attention, right? On LinkedIn and PR kind of activities, right? It can be super powerful, right? To actually, reward people, right? Bring them along, right? Give them, make them shine on LinkedIn, right? Make a fantastic story and show how great they did, right? Can be a super big motivator for some people to do the right thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, really nice. Yeah, and there's a comment saying sometimes it's more about the journey than getting to the finish. In the end, the goals will be important, but the journey needs to be celebrated as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
I always like to comment here actually on competition, by the way. I see here the competition is very true as well, right? I mean, also business leaders, if you show a dashboard, right, to one of the leaders, right? If you have multiple businesses, never show them just their own dashboard, but also show them the others. Because indeed, I mean, these are very competitive people, right? So if they see that someone is actually doing better, right, they're not gonna like that, right? And they will do much more to actually the power of rankings. Yeah, they will want to be better at it. It's very normal behavior, so let's use that.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's time to hand over back to Ulrike for the wrap up. So sorry, we're going to run out of time.
Thank you so much, Marjolein. Yeah, it's great. It's always you have warming up, and then the discussion indeed starts. So we're always a bit short on time in the end. But what we would like to do is wrap up indeed. So we have been talking about the CSRD. We truly believe you can use it as a tool for change. It's fantastic that also it's about the carrot and the stick, right? What was also mentioned. So compliance also helps indeed. To get sustainability on the agenda in the companies now. But of course, it's always the combination of the carrot and the sticks. But use it in your advantage. Being stubborn, I think, is good, consistent, right? But then also sometimes giving in and adjusting when needed. And for I think for embedding sustainability, be aware that you have 60 practices, the 4 dimensions, and never try to indeed implement all of those practices, but do focus on all 4 dimensions. I think that is a key takeout. And as Eelco also mentioned, maybe do 2 or 3 per dimension, not more, but really understand and be aware of all the practices which are applicable and see which one fits best to your organization. What we would like to do, I would like to thank Eelco very much for his contribution, thoughts, insights, and also Marjolein, of course, for the fantastic insight on resistance and behavior change, because we do think that there's so much needed in the times we are. We have the model, of course. If you're more interested in more information, please reach out to us. You can always call us or mail us. And for now, I think we had a big group of 70 people plus. We were recorded, sent it also to all the other participants who were not able to join today. We wish you a good summer, and it's also always a time to think about how you can actually leverage the CSRD as a tool for change in your organization. And with that, actually, have a fantastic summer and use it as a tool for change. And I hope you can make the impact in your organization. Thank you so much.